We just looked at the side scissor position. I'm going to encourage you guys to really make that a big part of your closed guard game when you're working your no-gi jiu-jitsu. Let's move now to a second form of advantageous attack position from closed guard. This works particularly well in conjunction with side scissor for reasons that will soon become obvious. This is double underhooks. Let's look initially at the advantages of using double underhooks from closed guard. Understand always that closed guard is a locking of my limbs, in this case my legs, around a section of my opponent's body. In this case it's the hips. If I can add to this the idea of locking not only my legs around my opponent's body, but also my arms, now I control the two most important parts of my opponent's body. The hips are controlled by my legs, and the head and shoulders are controlled by my locked hands. When Jay goes to move around in this situation, it's awfully difficult for him to do anything effective. Okay, he's more or less kept in a broken posture. From Jay's perspective in my closed guard, what he wants is an upright posture that enables him to stand up and open up my closed guard. It's very hard to open up my closed guard when he stays down on two knees. It's not impossible, but it's pretty damn difficult. It does become impossible once we get to double underhooks, because now we can't even get the minimum posture required to even open my guard. Okay? So not only can my opponent not pass my guard, he can't even so much as open it, as long as I maintain this grip. And you can keep your opponent in these extended positions where it's very hard for him to be effective. And you can start getting angle on your opponents. Okay? Once you start getting into positions like this, it's hard for him even to base out. You're controlling both of your training partner's arms. They get stretched out, discombobulated, and from here you can start moving around and getting good angles on your opponents. Okay? So the great advantage of double underhooks is it involves control not only of your opponent's lower body through your legs, but of your opponent's head and upper body through your arms. It's very difficult for your opponent to successfully break the grips. And in addition, he can't even begin to open up your closed guard. Forget about pass it. And he's in a position where you can stretch him out, completely undermine his posture, and start going on the attack with some really good attacks that we'll be looking at. So closed guard in itself is a good position, but when you add double underhooks, you double its effectiveness, and you completely undermine your opponent's ability to do anything effective whatsoever until he breaks that grip of yours. You have him in a position where he can't even so much as maintain a decent posture, and the whole time you can attack him. So it really is often worth your while to add to the idea of a closed guard, this idea of double underhooks. In addition, it works extremely well in conjunction with the side scissor position that we looked at previously. Because the only way my opponent can really defend side scissor is to start posting on the floor with his opposite hand. And that's going to give you great entries into first an initial underhook, and then as you go to work on the other side, double underhooks. And what you typically find is that the more your opponent resists the side scissor, and the harder it is for you to find to get to the side scissor, the easier it becomes to move across and start working your double underhook series. Okay? So what you're going to find when you start sparring with your friends is that the more resistance you get to side scissor, the more success you're going to have with your double underhook series. So you learn to play those two against each other. You're going to have a lot of success. Now, we're trying to push the idea of double underhooks as one of the best positions to work with no gi out of closed guard. First, we've got to learn how to get there in the first place. So the first method we're going to look at is one of our favorites. This is elbow posting. Okay? From a situation where we start off in closed guard, most of the time your opponent will have hands on the biceps. Remember guys, we're working no gi. If we had a gi on, our opponent would probably be looking to get a hold of both of our lapels, put his hand on our sternum, second hand either on the belt, the pants, or my sleeve, and work from there. Okay, but when we go no-gi, by far the most common grip is here at the biceps. When we see this, we're just going to take our two hands and we're going to post with V grips right there just above our training partner's elbows. No matter how strong this guy holds, we're just going to put our hands in like so. Then we're going to take our hips just a fraction off the ground, just like so. And we're going to pull with our legs in a big motion. We're just going to give a little bump that takes our training partner's thumbs See how Jay has his thumb over my bicep? I'm going to take his thumbs over my biceps. So my elbows go in, we post, and my legs do 90% of the work. I'm not just doing this with my hands. My legs pull. And just when we get to that pull motion and all the weight goes on his thumbs, we just flick him over the top. As soon as we see that, boom, we come up and we get to our lock. We work our hands into either 10 finger, palm to palm, or wrist to wrist. I've got short arms, so I almost always go 10 finger. The longer and taller you are, the more inclined you'll be to use tighter grips. As soon as we see this, we start stretching our training partner out. I put the back of my hand right on the base of my training partner's skull. From here, we're typically looking to get angle, so I like to hook inside my training partner's ankles, just like so with grapevines, and start to turn out to the side. Once we get here, we start maneuvering out to the side and locking up, and we've got double underhooks. When Jay goes to pull away from us, it won't be easy. Okay, we've got them locked in place, and we're looking good. So once again, my opponent's in a fairly good standard start position. I just take my two thumbs and put them right there above his elbows. I take my hips just a fraction off the ground, and we give a good pull with our legs. My knees pulling all the way up into his armpits, just like so. We add the idea of a quick push with our double thumb posts, and we lock up and over the head. When Jay goes to yank out, it's a difficult thing. Then we're always looking to get angles on our training partner, moving him out to the side and creating situations where now we're looking good. We've got angle, we've got double underhooks. Okay? So this is a very practical way to get into double underhooks out of closed guard situation. We just looked at the idea of using double elbow posts to get into double underhooks. Now let's look at a wrist control method. Why would we use this method? Well, not all of our opponents put their hands on the biceps. Some of them post on the throat and they go into a side-on stance like so. Okay, it's not a bad no-gi grip for them to stand up in our closed guard. When we see this, we take two hands, like a baseball bat grip, on our training partner's wrist. Now, you see this one here? It's not going to give much protection from my knee pull. Let's do an experiment. Just fold your arm. Try to hold yourself up with this hand. Because the hand is so far down my body, it provides very little leverage to prevent a knee pull. Okay, so this is not the one that's going to hold him up. It's this one. Take this hand off. Now when I pull in, you can put it in my throat. From here, when I go to pull him in, it provides a good base of support. So my opponent has two hands on me, but this is the one that I'm worried about. Okay, so we grab it, and from here, we give a simple knee pull. We take everything over our shoulder, like so. Now we pommel this hand inside, and we come in, and you guessed it, we lock up, double underhooks. As always from here, we're looking to start turning our body from one side out to the other until we can get a good angle on our training partner. Now, we've got closed guard, double underhooks. It's going to be hard for our opponent to move away from us. So once again, closed guard situation. This time, the previous elbow post is going to be difficult because of the change in arm position. So we lock and we pull, as always, with the legs. The legs take him out of position, then we guide the hand over the top and send his hands to the mat. As soon as we get there, without delay, we lock up. From here, we're always flaring out those elbows. We're always pushing side to side. If necessary, we'll grapevine legs. And then from these situations, we've got what we want. Closed guard, double underhooks. Now, another method of getting our opponent's hands down to the mat so we can get into double underhooks is a derivation of the flower sweep. It's essentially just half of a flower sweep. Anytime your opponent gets hit with a flower sweep, they're going to want to base out on the floor so they don't fall over. Okay, and that's going to give us opportunities to go into double underhooks. So, from a situation where we're working from closed guard and our opponent has hands on us, we're going to go through and we're going to capture our training partner's wrist. I don't care what he does with the other hand. From here, we're going to plant our foot down on the mat and we're going to hit a flower sweep with no real intention of sweeping him. Why? Because he can base out with this hand. Okay. As we go for the flower sweep, we bring the leg up, we chop, and we bring his hand defensively to the mat. And we just put our hand here on his back. As Jay goes to recover, and of course he has to recover, if he stays in the position, I can take his back. Okay, and it gives me a side scissor. From side scissor, we can go to work. Okay, so when we hit this method, we put our hand on his back. As he goes to recover, you get an underhook. Then you punch through on the other side, and you got double underhooks. From here, we do what we always do. We lock up right here behind our training partner's back, and we start scissoring to get into angle. Once we get there, you don't have to, but I often like to use grapevines to solidify that angle. And then from here, you're in closed guard, double underhooks in place. Okay? So once again, we start off, we get a hold of our training partner's wrist. I hit half of a flower sweep to get his hands down to the mat, but the flower sweep fails. Maybe Jay's explosive, strong, rips his arm out and lands on the mat. As he goes to recover, we pull in with the legs. We find ourselves now in good position. Okay? As always from here, we're looking to get our hips out and away to the side. Into angles, where we lock up closed guard with double underhooks, and we're ready to play. Another excellent method to get into double underhooks is the collar and scoop method. The collar and scoop enables us to off-balance an opponent and get his hands to the mat as he tries to recover his balance. And anytime hands go on the mat, there's going to be a big space underneath your opponent's arm that you can pull into double underhooks and get to work. So, once again, we start off in a closed guard situation. From here, we're going to get a hold of our training partner's collar. We're going to bring our second hand in here. We're going to get a scoop grip on our training partner's leg. I'm going to shift my body out to the side. And we're going to hit a big off balance that forces my opponent to grip me by the neck so that he doesn't get out of balance. Can you see what Jay did to recover his balance? He grabbed my neck and he posted with his other hand. Okay, so he saved his balance. But it came at a big price. And that price is double underhooks. So we lock in. We now find ourselves in our favorite position here. Locking up, finding our angle. As always, tilting, moving out to the side, and we're double underhooks from closed guard. So once again, we have an opponent working here in our closed guard. We take a collar tie, strong body, and from here we take our second hand and we scoop inside our training partner's leg. From here we get a minor angle, and then we perform a big pull using our legs as the primary element in the pull that forces our training partner to base out and grab the neck and head. He saved his base, but it came at the price of double underhooks. Once we get into double underhooks, we're always looking to move out to angles. From those angles, we're looking good. Now, we're looking at double underhooks as one of the best attacking positions from closed guard. Our contention is that once you get double underhooks, you've more or less won the battle for posture. It's very, very hard for your opponent to recover posture as long as you have double underhooks on him. Not only have you won the battle for posture, but you're in a great position to start attacking people. The attack we use more than any other from double underhooks is the slide by, where we use the fact that we're underneath both of our opponent's arms to move to an angle and then expand the angle as much as possible until we can go from locked hands to open hands and move behind our opponent's arms and take their back. Let's have a look at this right now. From a situation in closed guard where we have successfully managed to get our opponent's hands down to the mat using any one of the methods that we've looked at so far. We come through and we get our initial double underhooks. From double underhooks, we want the lock of our hands to be as high as possible, all the way up just like so. Now from here, we start the action of stretching our opponent out. We want to get his arms all the way up and his base of support somewhat narrow. Now we want to get angle. You've got a bunch of good options here. One good option is just to simply open up your closed guard and scissor your legs so that your hips start to come out to a given side. Another great option is to grapevine your training partner's ankles, where you take your feet and hook them into your training partner's ankles. You take one of his feet and stretch it out to the side. And as a result, you can start to get out to an angle. Another excellent method is to drop your bottom foot. One foot, the top foot comes up to the hip. Second foot goes into your training partner's hip. And as a result, you can start to push your hips out. You can finagle at your training partner's knees to get more and more of an angle until you start to come out to an angle like so. Okay, I'm going to demonstrate this one with Jay's butt to the camera so that you can see how my hips move out and away. So, closed guard situation. First, we get his hands to the mat. You can see that my hips are directly under Jay's. That's not a good thing from my perspective. We always want our hips moving out to the side. So the first method, we simply scissor our legs. Second method, we go through and we grapevine the feet, and we extend one foot out and away. Then we just stand on the opposite leg, and from here, we're out. Third method involves taking our bottom foot, placing it on our training partner's hip, and then pushing, so we can lock up a closed guard. Okay? And this gives us a good initial angle to work with, where your hips are no longer directly underneath your opponent's hips. Now, an initial angle is one thing, getting your opponent's back is another. So from here, we now need to make a switch in grips. Okay, it begins with double underhooks. Then, angle. Moving out to the side. Once we've got angle, we throw our legs over and we find ourselves now in a good position to start our attack. We're going to unlock our hands, and I'm going to put my hand here all the way around my training partner's neck, as far as it'll go. My second hand goes here, inside his forearm. So when Jay tries to bring his left hand back towards me, it's very, very difficult. Now, we're going to start the action of continuing the slide around our training partner. We're going to shift, we're going to point our knee down towards the floor. Okay? I don't want my knee facing up to the ceiling. We come in like so. And from this position, we start throwing the other leg as far over our training partner's hip as it'll go. You can take your second foot and place it on your training partner's thigh and push his base out to lower his base. You probably won't collapse that easily, but from bringing it in, you start pushing on it just like so. Now I take this hand and elbow and I pull it inwards. I take my foot and I put it between my training partner's legs, and I put my toes, the ball of the foot, on the ground. And as a result, we can start the action of pulling our body up and starting to get our hips behind our training partner. Once we get to this position, we're going to take our hand and place it out here as a base of support and pull our body up. My foot goes across my training partner's thigh. Now we're halfway behind him. Now the hand that was around the neck repositions behind the armpit, and we give one big pull to reposition our body behind him. Now we're in the perfect position to lock a body triangle, place a second hook in, lock our ankles, or even just keep your knee close to your foot, and you're behind your opponent. So looking at all that again, we start off getting his hands to the floor. Second, we get to our high lock with our hands, double underhooks, just like so. Now we start looking for an angle. As we come out to the side, we make a switch, gripping in like so. When he tries to pull away from us, it won't be easy from situations like this. Now, our feet go in. You can lock your feet again, or you can just have them open. I pass one foot between my training partner's legs. I pull my elbow around the corner and I push off my bottom leg so that my hips come up on top of him, and we slide past our training partner and get his hands to the mat. Now I take this hand and post it here on the floor. We start winning the battle for height. I have diagonal control now. My left arm is behind his armpit and my right hook is in. We never want to have grips like so. If Jay hip shucks me, he can put me down to the floor. If I'm behind this arm, I have my left arm in and my right hook in. Even if he did hip shuck me, I would stay stuck to him. Okay? From positions like this, we often take our foot and hook behind our training partner's shoelaces. So when he tries to stand up, it's very, very difficult for him. As he makes a strong, resistant base, we place our forearm over the back of our training partner's head and bring him down to the mat with a power half Nelson, and we're in business. Okay? Seen from another angle, the slide by. We start off, closed guard situation. we get his hands to the mat. And as a result, we get underneath both of his arms. Now, our whole thing is to start finding angles on our training partner. However we do it. We move out to the side. We get our hands open now, and this arm as far around as possible. So we can start moving our body out and away, and then from this position, building up to our base. As our elbow comes back, we catch. Okay? Now we're in the perfect position to start pulling our body up on top of our training partner, like climbing a rope. Once we get to a position like this, you can place your hooks in conventionally. You can lock a body triangle. If you've got short legs like me, you can just cross your feet, or you can even just put your knee close to your own foot. So long as you have diagonal control at a minimum, you're going to be in a good position to break this guy down to the mat and go into all of your favorite finishes from here. Okay? One more time. This is a very important move, so let's spend some time on it. Closed guard situation. First, get his hands to the floor. Second, get your underhooks and work your way up to a high lock. So when Jay tries to get his elbows out, it won't be easy. It'll be even more difficult when we start using our lower body to find angle. You can do this in a number of different ways. Once we get to a position like this, and we feel we're getting some good angle, now it's time for us to start switching from locked hands to open hands. He tries to bring his hands back in, it won't be easy. You can subvert his base, pushing on his legs like so. Now we pull our elbow back, slip by. You can stay with this grip, it's a good handle, or the handle we favor so much, the lat. I leave it up to you, they're both great options. Okay? Now, once we get those handles, it's time for us to put an elbow on the floor. Don't try to come up all the way from your shoulder. It's difficult. Put your elbow down first so you can start coming up to a knee, finagling your body in, and now you're in perfect position on top of your training partner. Once we get to positions like this, it's pretty easy to use a power half Nelson to bring this guy to the mat. Okay? Now, we're looking at the slide by as what I think is the single best move out of double underhooks, and the one that I want you attempting first above and beyond all the others. However, understand that because there's so much physical contact between you and your opponent, there's a lot of things they can do to make it hard for you to get around. I'm going to give you guys just a little insight on slide bys right from the start so that your expectations are in the right direction. Slide bys typically look rather messy when you perform them in live sparring and competition. Okay, it's not a pretty move to look at because you have to literally wiggle your way past your opponent's arm and get behind them. It's not one of those spectacular moves where you just smoothly go through and get it unless you're drilling with a non-resisting opponent. What you are typically going to find is your opponent will try to hold on to you. Sometimes they headlock you, sometimes they try to move their body and flatten your hips out. And there's going to be some shimmying, some shaking, some shrimping, and you're going to finagle your way past your opponent's arms. It's not going to look smooth and pretty every time. So don't think of the move in terms of aesthetic values. Think of it in terms of effectiveness. Just as long as you get behind your opponent, you're happy. It doesn't matter whether it looks pretty or whether it looks ugly. Just as long as you get to the destination, we're thrilled. So let's now start to look at some common problems associated with slide bys and how we can overcome them. Okay. Closed guard situation. From here, we get into our double underhooks. We know our first responsibility is to get the beginnings of angle. Okay? However we do it, whether we do by sliding out to a side or using grapevines, we move out to the beginnings of an angle. Once we get an initial angle on an opponent, it's time for us to unlock our hands and put the hand inside here. Second hand grabs the neck. It can even go inside the armpit. Okay, they're both good options. Now, your whole battle is against this arm. The more extended his arm, the easier your task. Okay, as I take my knee and point it down to the floor, if his arm extends, it's relatively easy to send it by. Okay, your opponents know that, and so they will try to take their arm and hook it around your head. And now it can be a little more difficult for you to work your way out. When we see someone hooking our head in this position, I'm going to recommend taking your foot, placing it on their thigh, and stretching them out a little bit more. Okay? Then we're going to take our second foot and cast it over the top of our training partner's hip, and we're going to build up to an elbow and get our elbow in behind us. Now, if I look towards Jay, I give him purchase on my head. So we're going to put our head down on the floor. And from this position, I'm going to push off my foot, and I'm going to reposition my left hand. My left hand goes from inside the armpit to the far lat, even the tricep. I generally prefer the lat muscle. Now from here, I push my hips up off the mat, and I get my hook inside my training partner's leg. Even when Jay goes to grab my head now, it means very little. Once I put my hand out here, he can grab my head all he wants. Now fellas, if my head comes off the mat, he can headlock me, and that will stop me, okay? So we put our head on the floor, so he cannot fully headlock us. I come up to a knee, I put my hand on the mat, and now Jay holds on as tight as he can. It's not that tight. And then I just whip my head towards my own hand. See my right hand? My head goes towards my right hand. And as a result, we can now reposition, and we're in behind our training partner in the perfect position to break him down to the mat. Okay? Let's have a look at all that from another angle. Close guard situation. Get his hands to the mat. Get to your lock. Start to find angle. From here, as we get out to the side, we switch our grips to open hands. Now, we come out to the side like so. From here, if necessary, we'll push on the thigh. We get our foot hooked in, and then we start building up to our base. My elbow comes in, I put my head on the floor, and I look away from him. The more I look at Jay, and my head is off the mat, the more headlock I offer him. So I want to look away from him. If necessary, I grab the lat muscle as a handle. That's the preferred handle. I take this bottom foot and I put it down on the mat, and I use that to come up to my knees. Don't try to come up from your hip. It's very, very difficult. Come up to a knee first. Jay will want to run you down back to your hip this way. That helps him. So it's important, once we get up to a knee, that we put our hand down. So he tries to run us in, you can't do it. Now, I just move my head towards this hand. And as a result, we're locked in behind him. We're in perfect position now to take our opponents back. We've got to our score. Okay? Let's look at that from another angle. It's 45 to the camera. So, this is the arm that my opponent will post on. This is the arm that I have to beat. As I come out to the side, shimmy out to the side. We take our foot, extend his base out, and I start working inside this hand. Okay, as he tries to bring the hand back to the chest, it won't be easy. My hand goes all the way inside as a hook. There's a good handle there at the armpit. From this position, we start to move our body out and away. Now from this position, I take my elbow back in towards myself. Okay? At the same time, this foot goes inside our training partner's legs, down to the mat. So I have a shallow hook here with my foot, second foot goes on the mat, hands inside. When Jay tries to stop me from here, it's a difficult thing for him to do. Now, my elbow comes back and my forehead goes to the mat. I personally like to go from here to here. I feel it's a stronger handle. Now, I come up to my knee. Watch my right knee. I lift and put my knee out. Now this hand comes out and I move my head towards my own hand. Sorry. It's okay. And then from this position, we're locked up behind our opponent. We've got our score. Okay? Now guys, can you see this important theme? That when it's done against more resistance, it's not going to be pretty. You're not just going to slip around easily on a knowledgeable opponent. You might do it on a beginner. You're not going to do it easily on a tough opponent who knows what this move is. It's going to be this kind of step-by-step method. Okay, I'm just going to show you some details now solo so that you can get some key ideas in mind. Okay, we have an imaginary opponent in our closed guard. First, we get his hands on the mat, we go to high body lock. We get an initial movement to the side, then we switch from locked hands to open hands, blocking away his far arm. Okay, what we've done so far is pretty easy, nothing particularly difficult about that. The hard part becomes beating the arm that's around your neck and getting off your side. Okay, you're going to have to do this against resistance. It's going to be some active work here. So as we push, we take our bottom foot and we put it on the floor so you can derive power off the mat. Now from here, I can't get up as long as my elbow is in front of me. So our whole thing is to put our forehead on the mat so we can get our elbow behind us. Okay, once the elbow is behind us, we push off the mat and we go to a knee. It's very, very difficult to come straight up to your hip. You have to have great agility and good pulling strength in your arm to do that, and your opponent can stop you by pushing back into you. Okay, so I'm going to recommend from here to here. Now, this is not the most stable position in the world. If your opponent bumped you, you'd fall back to your hip. So it's important that once we get to a knee, we put this hand on the mat. So I'm stable now. Now we grab the lat muscle and I move my head towards my own hand to slip out of his headlock, and then we step over into the rear mount position. So with all that in mind, we take our opponent into closed guard, double underhooks. We lock up initially, so if he tries to pull away, you've got great control over his posture. But you need an angle now, so we start moving out and away. Once we do so, we're in a good position to start stretching our opponent out. We make the switch to open hands. Initially, I may have the hand tucked in as a handle in the armpit. Okay, as he goes to headlock me, I take away much of the effect of his headlock by putting my head on the floor and getting my elbow behind me. When Jay tries to pull away, it's not as easy as it looks. Okay, especially if we convert to the lat. Jay, go to pull away from me, buddy. I make it tough by stretching his leg out, etc., etc. Now, I come up, my knee is on the mat, my hand goes up, and we slide on by, and we're behind our training partner, we've got our score, and we're in a good position to start finishing people. Okay? So these are some of the major troubleshooting elements associated with the slide by from double underhooks. One of the most common criticisms of closed guard is that it's dependent upon your body type. When you look historically at most of the people who excelled at closed guard, they tended to be taller athletes with long, thin legs. And as a result, they had an easy time locking around their opponent's waist and controlling them. Shorter athletes with thick legs often feel left out when it comes to the closed guard game. I think it's true that certain kinds of closed guard attacks are definitely more difficult for people with short legs. However, I still believe that closed guard can be used very advantageously by shorter, thicker athletes, just in very different ways. What we're going to do is we're going to coach you through a two-stage philosophy, where you're going to use your closed guard just to immobilize your opponent. That's all you're going to do. You're going to immobilize him. You're going to lock your legs around and stop him from moving. Because you have a closed guard, you have control over distance. You have a lot of control over his movement, and a good ability to off-balance him and force hands to the mat. Once you've accomplished that first step of locking your opponent in a closed guard, you're going to look to break his balance and get his hands to the mat. Once his hands go to the mat, we're going to get double underhooks and lock up our arms so that now you have real control over his movement and his posture. And then you're going to do the thing that makes it work so well for shorter athletes. Having gotten to your upper body dominant grips, you're going to switch your legs from closed guard to open guard. And from that open guard, with the dominant upper body grips, you're going to find it's quite easy to sweep people. So you're going to use closed guard just as an initial immobilization to get to dominant upper body grips. Once you've got dominant upper body grips, you're going to switch from closed to open and do your sweeping from open guard, which is much easier for people with shorter, thicker legs. In this way, you use a kind of a two-stage approach, where closed guard is used just as a method to immobilize opponents long enough to get to upper body dominance. Then, once you achieve upper body dominance, switch from closed to open and do your sweeping from there. Let's have a look at how this might look. Okay, we come up against an opponent who, say for example, is on 2 knees. From here, we want to get into a closed guard situation. So I'm going to approach my training partner. We're going to get a hold of our training partner by the collar, and I'm going to put my foot on my training partner's hip, and I'm going to force this hand to the mat by scissoring. I push one foot into his hip, and the second leg goes across almost like a variation of a scissor sweep and forces his hand to the mat. Because the hand goes to the mat, there's nothing stopping me from getting my legs together and locking up a closed guard. So once again, from another angle, a simple way to get to closed guard from an open guard situation. We approach our training partner, tying up his hands. If he pulls away, that's fine. That'll leave me the collar, which is what I really want all along. Now I put my foot on my training partner's hip, and I use this leg to put myself into a situation where I can off-balance him. Off that scissoring leg effect, we quickly lock up a closed guard. Okay? So you've gotten to the closed guard. Now it's time to use it. Once again, we approach, catch our training partner by the collar. Foot goes on the hip, we scissor and lock. So now we're in closed guard. As he takes his standard postures, we put his hands on the mat using the closed guard kazushi that we saw earlier in the video. Once the hands go on the mat, we come up and get, you guessed it, double underhooks. From double underhooks position, we start to find angle on our training partner, however we do it. Once we get into positions like this, when he goes to recover, it's going to be tough. You've got that good upper body grip. And then from here, we start finagling our legs inside as butterfly hooks. Once we get those butterfly hooks in place, we perform a forward shift and come up into seated position. And now you have dominant upper body grips. When he tries to reach the floor with his hands, it won't be easy. And you have your legs where shorter athletes do their best work in inside position. You've substituted closed guard outside position for inside position butterfly. Okay? And this is the methodology that I'm going to encourage shorter, thicker athletes to use with closed guard. Rather than do something your body is ill suited to perform, which is to encase your opponent with your legs, just use the legs long enough around your opponent's body to secure upper body grips. Once you get dominant upper body grips, the sweeps of jiu-jitsu become so much easier. Think about open guard situations, guys. If open guard is my go-to move, your opponent will make it very hard for you to get dominant upper body grips. It's hard work. But if I start with him trapped inside my legs, it's hard for him to avoid those upper body grips. Okay, you get into them so much more easily. And so this two-stage philosophy can really help out shorter athletes who are struggling against highly resistant opponents to get to the upper body grips that are necessary to start your sweeping and submissions game. Okay, just going straight to an underhook or a good opponent, it's very, very difficult. Okay, if I try to take a collar tie and he intercepts, it makes it hard for me to get to a collar tie. I try to get wrist control and he's snapping away from me, it's hard to get to my grips. Okay, so if we start by pulling this guy into a closed guard, now it's so much easier to win the grip game. Once we get upper body grips, being that I'm a shorter athlete with short legs, it may not be easy for me to go into many of the attacks we've seen. No problem. We just convert from closed to open guard. When he tries to pull away, you've got that same upper body dominant grip. And from here, because you're inside and underneath, it's easy for you to use those short legs of yours to get on the attack. Okay? So, you start off with closed guard as a holding mechanism. Rather than use closed guard as an attack from start to finish, just use it to start the ball rolling. Hold your opponent in place, then you're going to find it's very easy to get to the next step, upper body grips. Once you establish dominant upper body grips, then convert into the open guard situation with the upper body grips in place, you're ready to attack. This is often an easier gambit than just starting from open guard, where it can be very tough to get upper body dominant grips on an opponent who knows what they are and is resisting you. Using this approach, shorter, thicker athletes can use closed guard very profitably to get into their sweeping game. Now we're looking at how shorter athletes can profitably use closed guard using a two-step system where they initiate with a closed guard to get to their upper body grips. Once they establish dominant upper body grips, then they switch back to open guard and actually sweep people. First method we're going to look at to sweep someone, Hisaguruma. So we have an opponent who we've managed to put into closed guard. We do a good job of getting their hands to the floor. We do a good job of getting to our double underhooks. From here, we start to move our body up to a given side, and as a result, we can start to get our feet in this hooks just like so. Every time we go to move out, we find ourselves now in the perfect position to hit our forward shift. I go from a supine position, I take my knees up to my chest so that my training partner's body weight floats over me like so. Then we extend our legs out and away and sit up. From the seated position, when Jay tries to reach the floor with his hands, it's very, very difficult because of my double underhooks. I flare my elbows. Don't have your hands down the back, it's no good. We want our hands all the way up here. If you want to switch to tighter grips, you're welcome to do so. Now from this position, as Jay goes to pull away from me, it's notoriously difficult. Now we take our foot, we put it on his knee. My toes point outwards, never upwards. If the toes point upwards, the foot tends to slip off the thigh. We want to find our training partner's knee, toes pointing out and away, and we just extend his knee and break his balance. I look where I want him to land. Jay tries to reach the floor with his left hand. It's not going to happen. Come back with your knee, Jay. Essentially what we're trying to do is separate his knee and his elbow on that side of his body. See how as his knee goes away, his balance is broken. The further it goes away, the easier it becomes. Now we just pull our body up and we end up in good attacking position. My knee over my training partner's hip. I don't give him my knee in half guard. That's going to slow us down. We make sure the knee stays over. So the most he's going to be able to lock is going to be our ankle. Once we get to a position like this, we're looking good to put our head down on the floor, pop our second knee over his body, and use that to extract the first leg. Then we just walk around and find ourselves in a perfect side control position, ready to get mounted. So, once again, step number one is always to pull this guy into the closed guard. Step number two, get his hands on the floor. Step number three, get to a dominant upper body grip. We're favoring double underhooks, hands locked. From here, step number four, find sufficient angle that we can start to get a conversion from closed guard to open guard. One side, the other side. Now go from a supine position to a seated position. Now from here, place your foot on your training partner's knee. Hisa means knee. We put the foot on the knee. Guruma means wheel. We wheel our opponent over and end up on top. From this position, our head comes down, knee cuts across, we extract our leg, and as a result, we end up in a perfect side control position, locked up, ready to get into the mount. One more time from another angle. We use closed guard as a mechanism to control our training partner and get to our favorite upper body grips. In this case, it's double underhooks. From here, we move out to an angle, looking always to get our foot inside and underneath. Now we perform the forward shift. Now, Hisaguruma. And into a good pin we go. Okay? So this is a very simple and very practical way for shorter athletes to use closed guard to initially tie an opponent up with your legs, then tie them up with your arms, and then switch your legs from outside to inside position. The inside position greatly favors shorter athletes, and as a result, you have a realistic way of first using closed guard merely as a means to tie him up, slow him down, and control distance and movement so you can get to your upper body grips. Once the upper body grips are established, go back to what shorter athletes do best. Get inside position, start sweeping people. Now, another excellent attack that we can use when we use this two-stage method of first getting to a closed guard to get upper body grips, and then from upper body grips, converting to open guard and sweeping people, is sumigeshi. We're going to demonstrate it out of double underhooks. So again, we have an opponent in front of us on two knees. As a result, we're able to pull them in and grip them into the closed guard situation. We're using closed guard just to immobilize them long enough that we can take an opponent's hands and put them on the floor. We immediately come up and lock up the upper body. From the upper body, we're always looking to find angles so that we can start to get feet in. Sometimes we'll move his feet away, that's fine. And as a result, it's even easier to get your butterfly hooks in place. We do the same on the other side. From here, we're going to lift our opponent up and force him to base out. I lift him over to a given side and force him to base out with his left hand and his left foot. But he has a limited ability to base. And it's very easy for us to put our foot right there on our training partner's knee, just like we did with Hizaguruma. Now I lift his hand off the mat, and at the same time, I push his leg. And as a result, we end up in perfect position to cut across our training partner's stomach and take a good side pin from where we can get mounted. So once again, a shorter athlete often struggles to get dominant grips like this directly from open guard. It's not easy on good people. So instead we use closed guard as a foot in the door to control people and then get to our dominant upper body grips. So we catch the collar, pull him in and lock. We get his hands to the mat and we get the grips that we need to start sweeping tough opponents. We shimmy to get angle until feet start going in. Once the feet go in, we lift and we take him out to a given side. So he has to base out. We find his base of support with our foot and turn this guy over. From here, we cut across, pass, and pin. This is an excellent way to use closed guard on the part of shorter athletes to immobilize people long enough to get to those upper body grips that make the open guard sweeps easy. So you use, again, closed guard as an immobilizing tool to get the grips you need to sweep people from open guard. We're looking at this idea that we can use closed guard as a way of just stopping someone from moving around. And as a result, once they're stopped and immobilized, it's pretty easy to swim your way into upper body grips. Once you get dominant upper body grips, it's pretty easy to start sweeping people from open guard. So for shorter athletes, I generally encourage an approach where they use closed guard not as an end in itself or a complete form of attack, because their body often doesn't really support that kind of thinking, especially when they're going against heavier opponents, but rather as a kind of two-stage philosophy where you use your legs, which are just long enough to simply wrap around someone, but not long enough to do much more than that, to just immobilize them for a short period of time. Then off-balance them and work your way into dominant upper body grips. We're looking at double underhooks as one excellent form of double upper body grips. Once you've done that and you've got those dominant upper body grips, then you just switch to open guard, which is much better suited for most shorter, thicker athletes. And then from there, you do your sweeping game. Another fine example of this is the idea of a bear hug sweep. Let's have a look at this right now. We've got a guy on two knees. We approach in towards our training partner and we just get a hold of the collar, off balance them, and we pull them into closed guard. From here, we take our hands, we put his hands on the mat. We come in and we get our dominant upper body grips, double underhooks. We start the action of forming angles, which make it pretty easy for us to get our feet inside. If you're ever having a hard time getting your feet inside, don't be afraid to use grapevines to take his knees further out and away, and you'll always get that foot inside. As he recovers, you come out on the other side, and you're in. Now, previously, we've been looking at the idea of sweeping people to the side. Another excellent alternative is to get our opponents up, like so, and then take them straight away from us with a forward shift. As I do this, my hands switch from high to mid-back. So I go from here to here. You notice, guys, that I use a 10-finger grip for this so that my arms move more easily. If I'm too tight, my arms don't move very far. So I keep a rather loose 10-finger grip. Now I throw him away from me for distance. And as I do this, I stand up. As I stand, I step around so that I'm side on to him. And in one motion, I change my hand grip to the lower body. I get all the way around the lumbar region and I switch from 10-finger to wrist. Now in one motion, I just pull him between my legs. And as a result, we get a nice sweep. We tilt our hands to the floor, our knee comes in, switches over, so we shut the door to leg locks. So once again, we start off in front of our training partner. I pull him in to a closed guard. We take the hands forward. We lock up. We start the action of converting ourselves from closed to open guard. Presumably he'll be pushing in towards us so he can base out and start to pull his body away. Now we take him up into the air, and then from here my hands switch as we hit the forward shift down to here. The forward shift throws him away from us. And then we come up to our feet. We step around his body so that we're side on. I lift his knees off the mat so that it's a very safe sweep. Come back up, buddy. Kneeling. We never run someone over their own ankles and hurt their toes and ankles. We always step to the side. This way it's nice and safe. Rather than drive into him and potentially hurt my training partner, I just lift and drop him. Okay? From another angle, we have an opponent in front of us. We come in and work our way to close guard. We get his hands to the mat and we lock up. From here, we perform various movements to ensure that we can get our feet inside as hooks. Then we perform a forward shift. As we do so, my hands switch down the body. Start with a high lock, end up mid-level. We throw him away and we come up. We step around the corner, relock, and put him down. Okay? And this is a very practical way to use bear hugs to put people down and get good results. We just looked at the bear hug sweep. It's a fine sweep, but it does rely on your ability to project your opponent's body weight away from you so you can stand up. Excuse me 1 second, Jay. The idea behind the bear hug sweep is that we project our opponent with a forward shift and then we pull our heels into our butt, like so. If I can bring my heels sufficiently close to my buttocks, then I should always be able to stand up, get the height advantage we need to step around and sweep. Okay? Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking to yourself, am I going to be able to do that under a bigger athlete's body weight to get up like that every single time? What you'll find is you get up about half the time, and then once you establish a reputation as someone who's good at this move, your opponent will try to commit weight forward and stop you from getting up. If they go soon enough into the move, they will succeed. But don't worry, you just go right back into the moves we've already seen. So, we have Jay in front of us. We come in, we commit to the closed guard. As the shorter athlete, we understand that closed guard can be used to immobilize someone long enough to get the dominant upper body grips. In this case, it's double underhooks. We know that once we establish double underhooks, we can fight to get angle on our training partner. And if we get sufficient angle, we can get our feet to the inside position. Now, what if we went to hit this body lock bear hug sweep and you felt like, oh man, I can't get up on this guy. Oh man, he's keeping his weight over me. Whenever we see this kind of thing going on, I feel like, nope, there's no way I'm coming up. You just go right back into the initial sweeps. And you play a dilemma game between Hizaguruma / Sumigeshi and the bear hug. If you catch the head moving backwards, you come up for your bear hug. If the head is moving forwards and your opponent is strongly resisting you, the only way they can resist you feeds directly back into your Hizaguruma and Sumigeshi. Let's have a look at this again. We have an opponent in front of us, and we pull him into closed guard. We take his hands forward, we lock up, and we start hunting for angle, getting our feet in. When it's time for us to hit that bear hug, you feel like, oh man, it's not going to happen. Okay, no problem. We lift him up, we put his body on the floor, and flip this guy right over. Now we're in the perfect position to do what we saw earlier. Cut across, pin, and we're ready to score some more points. Okay, so don't worry if you get stopped. It's not the end of the world. Just play a front-back dilemma. If the head moves back, come up and score that bear hug. If he stops you with head position and hunches forward on you, go right back to the first two moves we saw, either Hizaguruma or Sumigeshi, and you'll find they work even better now. As he overcommits with the head, it's even easier to knock him over. One of the themes of this video is that sometimes shorter, thicker athletes get the feeling that they get left behind in the closed guard game. That's true to some extent. There are some closed guard moves that just don't suit people that have very short legs or thick legs. Or if you have ordinary legs, but your opponent is just so big through the chest and torso that you feel like you can't form a tight connection with whatever your leg length is. My contention to you is, in these situations, don't abandon closed guard. You can use it just in a different way. Use it not so much as a complete form of attack, but rather as an initial immobilization that makes it much easier for you to get dominant upper body grips. And once you establish dominant upper body grips, then you can sweep from guard positions that are much more favorable for shorter, thicker athletes, such as butterfly guard, or what we're going to look at now, half guard. My contention is that if you've got shorter, thicker legs, butterfly guard and half guard are always going to be your best friends. So we're going to use closed guard, again, just as an immobilization device, get to the upper body grips that make sweeping people from half guard pretty damn easy. So we have an opponent in front of us, and we're going to first put them in closed guard just with the intention of getting into dominant upper body grips. In this case, double underhooks. From double underhooks, we're going to start hunting for angle. As we come out to a given side, we finagle feet in, come out again, and then from this position, I take my grips all the way across my training partner's body. Now I'm just going to flick my foot out and put my foot, the shoelaces, right inside his knee. As I come out to the side, I'm going to grab my training partner right inside. And I'm going to put my arm all the way around my training partner's body. As my ear goes in towards his chest, we now make a full conversion into half guard position. From half guard, we do what we always do. We take our outside leg and we make the Kosoto hook around our training partner's leg like so. Now we perform the lower leg shift. My left knee bumps my training partner forward and we lock a triangle around our training partner's ankle. When Jay tries to move away from me in positions like this, it's very, very hard. This is where shorter, thicker athletes truly excel against bigger opponents. It's easy, no matter how big they are, to lock around one of your opponent's ankles with your two legs. I don't care how short your legs are, I don't care how thick your legs are. Everyone can do this. From this position, we always start by off-balancing in this direction here, pushing our hips underneath, come lock up, pushing the hips underneath and off-balancing them in this direction. Pretty soon, your opponent's going to understand that's your opening move. And when you use it, they're going to post out with their whizzer hand. Put it on the floor. When we see that, we take this hand, we post on their rib cage. We take their whole body across to the other side and we put our ear on their lower back. I'm out to his right-hand side, so I want my right ear on his lower back. Now from here, we start to threaten our training partner's back, and we're in a good position to go in and start attacking people. So once again, from another angle, we have an opponent in front of us. We go through and pull him into closed guard. From closed guard, we get one of the very best attacking grips, double underhooks with a high lock. We start moving out to a given angle, stretching our opponents out and walking over to the side. From here, we put our foot inside. We put our arms around our training partner's waist and we convert our legs to this position. Now, my outside leg comes over and forms the Kosoto hook. Now, the lower leg shift. I bring this knee forward and the other knee away so that I scissor and take away a grip around my training partner's ankle. From here, I bring my body underneath the center of gravity. I crimp everything in and I sweep my training partner over to his back. Pretty soon, he's going to figure out he's got to put his hand on the floor to preserve his base. We put our hand on the rib cage. We take everything back in the opposite direction we just came. I put my ear on his back. I grab the far waist. I put my hand on the floor and I pull my body up. Now we end up in perfect attacking position behind our training partner, ready to go. Okay? There's a whole wealth of moves out of half guard position. But the main thing is you make this conversion from closed guard into half guard with double underhooks in place. This is going to make it very easy for you to go into pretty much any attack you favor. I'm showing the first two. They're the two most important attacks that set the whole ball rolling from half guard, and we'll give you 1,000 options from here. So once again, we start off in front of our training partner and we pull him right into closed guard. We bring his hands to the mat and we lock up a good high lock. When Jay tries to pull away, it won't be easy. Then we start taking control of things downstairs. Once we get all the way downstairs, we start pulling our body in close to half guard. From the half guard situation, move your feet towards the camera. From the half guard situation, I take the outside foot and hook over his ankle. Now the lower leg shift. I pull up with my arms and I push down with my lower leg. And as a result, we lock a triangle around his ankle. First thing from here is always to take him over our back. If you succeed, awesome. You're going to get a clean sweep. Most of our opponents quickly base out. When we feel them basing out, we put our hand on the rib cage and we take them right back and get our ear to their lower back. From this position, one hand grabs the waist, other hand finds the floor. Now we come up to our knees and find ourselves in the perfect attacking position, ready to go on top. These open up a whole range of half guard attacks that you may favor from that position, but we're not focused entirely on half guard in this video. Our main thing is the closed guard strategy, which puts you into a winning half guard position. And again, it's a two-stage strategy. Start off with closed guard just as an immobilization. If you can immobilize and control your opponent, control his movement, control his posture, control his balance, it's going to be easy for you to get dominant upper body grips. Use the closed guard as a shorter athlete just to get your dominant upper body grips. Once you've established dominant upper body grips, do what your body does best. Convert to either butterfly or half guard. The normal attacks that you employ from butterfly and half guard are difficult if you don't have upper body grips. The beauty of closed guard is it lets you start with the grips that make sweeps from butterfly and half guard easy. And so the shorter athlete can use the closed guard very profitably as an initial immobilization to get to the grips he needs, and then convert back to either half or butterfly, and then start sweeping people relatively easily. Now, fellas, we're looking at the question of how shorter, thicker athletes can be effective from closed guard. What we're proposing here is a two-stage philosophy that you use the closed guard just as a holding mechanism. Pretty much anyone can do that, no matter how short and thick your legs are. Most of the time you can just lock your feet, or at least get your knees around your opponent and hold them in a closed guard. And then from there, we use closed guard as a holding mechanism to get dominant upper body grips, and then we make a conversion to open guard usually some variation of butterfly, and we start sweeping people from open guard with the dominant upper body grips that we got previously from closed guard. So we started closed guard just as a holding mechanism. That was stage one. That holding mechanism enabled us to get upper body dominance, and then we switch from closed to open guard and start sweeping people. And this, in my opinion, is the easiest way for shorter, thicker athletes to use closed guard profitably. There's a sense in which this is even a superior method of just using open guard, because open guard just by itself, it's hard to get dominant grips on people. They know you're dangerous in open guard. They're pushing away. They stand up on you. They make it very hard for you to get to dominant upper body grips. So we use closed guard as a foot in the door. You use it to lock people up, immobilize them, get your upper body grips, then convert to open guard and start sweeping people. And that, in my opinion, is by far the most successful way in which shorter, thicker athletes can use closed guard to advantage. Now, one of my all-time favorite methods of using this strategy, everything we've looked at so far has been double underhooks. Now we're going to go double overhooks. What I like to see my students do, especially the shorter, thicker ones, is to start off closed guard, fight their way into double overhooks, controlling both of your opponent's arms. It's hard for them to pull away from you. And then from there, convert into at least one butterfly hook. And then use the fact you're controlling both of your opponent's arms from the outside to flip them over and get into top position. Okay, let's have a look at this now. Okay, we're going to start in a closed guard situation. From here, we take our hands inside. That's pretty easy to do. We pull in with a good old knee pull, and we start locking around our training partner's arms. Okay, now don't lock up so tight you can't move. Just favor one overhook is the more controlling one, and just lock in. Okay, when Jay goes to pull away from us, it's not as easy as it looks. Okay, now we're going to go hunting for his ankles. So I'm going to go through and put my grapevines inside my training partner's ankles, just like so. And I'm going to use those grapevines to start turning his knees out to a degree where it's pretty easy for us to start finagling a foot inside. Guys, once you get one foot inside, you can almost always get the second one in. You may not want to, okay? Sometimes you'll just want just 1 foot in, that's fine. But what I normally do is I finagle in, I get 2 feet in. Bring your knees in tight, buddy. Now, from here, we're going to start the action of off-balancing an opponent out to 45 degrees, just like so. Now from here, I take my arm and I go just below his elbow. If I go up here by the shoulder, Jay can put his hand on the floor and form an effective base. Put your hand down. Floor. So what we want to do is be just below the elbow on one side, so that when Jay reaches for the floor with his hand, you can always put it behind you. Now when Jay goes to pull his arm out, it's not so easy. From here, you can either stay with the double overhooks, or we can do what I like to do, which is to grab your training partner by the head. The reason I like this is because I want to touch his forehead on the mat. I take my leg out, and I really try hard to touch his forehead on the mat. Jay's going to do his level best not to be swept by tripoding out with his legs. When you touch your training partner's forehead to the mat, he's going to find it very, very difficult to prevent being swept over. Now from here, I take my collar tie off and I put my hand on his chest, so that when we go to scramble for position, you're underneath his arm. And as a result, you're going to swim through it into a good pin. Okay? Let's have a look at that from another angle. So we start off in a closed guard situation. From closed guard, we get inside the wrists, we knee pull. And as a result, we're able to hold this guy down, get to an overhook. The first overhook is pretty tight, get him around the shoulders, okay? Second one, maybe not so much. From this position, we start sliding our hips out to a given side so that we can hook inside our training partner's ankles. When he tries to make his legs strong and resistant, it's pretty tough. Grapevines are very good for off-balancing people. And we start placing our foot in as a hook. I've placed 1 foot in. Sometimes I place 2. But a lot of times I just place the first one in. From this position, we start the action of off-balancing our opponent. As I go for the off-balance, I come up here to my training partner's head. And we start that action of lifting. As we lift with 1 foot, we cut with the other. And as a result, we get a good ability. Even if this guy springs up to his knees off the floor and up to his feet, we get a good ability to start lifting and turning and taking people over. From here, we put our hand underneath. So when we go to fight for top position, you'll almost always end up chest to chest in good position on top. Okay, I'm going to demonstrate this one with Jay's back to the camera so you can see some of the leg positioning stuff. Okay, close guard, we get his hands down to the mat. We punch on through and lock up. We get through on our training partner's second arm, and from here we start finding our training partner's feet. We grapevine inside, start twisting and moving our training partner to a degree where I can get our feet inside. Now from here, we start that action of coming up. I slip just below his elbow, so when he tries to post on the floor, he can't do it. If I come up too high, he can post on the mat. That's going to screw everything up. So we always make sure we take everything in like so. Now I start that lifting action. Lifting, cutting out with the second foot and tilting this guy over. We step very often from here, putting our hand in the inside position. So when we go to get up together, you've got that underhook in place. And as a result, we end up on top. What we usually find with this one, guys, is at the outcome of the sweep, things get a little bit scrappy, but so long as you keep your head over his head, keep at least one of his arms tight, you'll end up on top. May not be pretty, may not end up in side control or mount or anything crazy like that, but you'll definitely substitute bottom position for top position. Let's look at it from another angle. Sorry, close guard situation. From here, we draw this guy forward. As we hold on, we go through, we lock up. There's your first overhook. Second one goes in, we lock up, and we've got our double overhooks. From here, we start turning on our training partner, getting our hooks in. There's one, there's two. Now we hit a little movement forward, and then from this position, it's so hard for Jay to prevent that control of the head that takes our man straight up and over and into a nice sweep. Into top position we go. From another angle. However we do it, we come in and we get to the closed guard position. From closed guard, we go through, we've got our first overhook in place. We come in, we get our second overhook. Now we start finding angles on our training partner. Turning the legs out, makes it easy to get the first hook in. Second hook goes in, and we're up. We go below the elbow. Hand comes in and controls the head. We're taking his forehead down to the mat. When he tries to base out with his legs, it's so hard to prevent that turnover. Hand goes inside, he comes up, we come up, and we're into a good pin. Okay? This is a really, really practical way to get into a winning position from bottom. One of the best ways for shorter, thicker athletes to use closed guard very, very profitably to get to those strong upper body grips. Once you get there, you get your 2 feet in, you're going to sweep a lot of people.